Hello. Again, this is a performance nutrition webinar out of Arizona State University, the College of Health Solutions. My name is Floris Wardenaar. I'm happy that you're here, that you're tuning in. And today we have Professor Mark Willems as a guest to talk about anthocyanins. He has been doing a lot of research over the years, a lot of case-based studies, but also controlled studies. And he knows a lot about the potential effects of anthocyanins on sports performance. So today the talk will all be about anthocyanins, and Professor Mark Willems, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Floris, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We had some issues with the slides, so what that means is that I go from one slide to the other and not presenting from a presentation mode. So sometimes that means you will see a lot of useful information all in one slide instead of me slowly building it up. But what I'm going to cover today is the following, is why there is the interest in anthocyanin-rich supplementation. And I will also use that opportunity to give a bit of background about what an anthocyanin is and where it fits into the family of polyphenols. Then I will move on to presenting some metabolic and exercise performance effects. And as Floris mentioned, we have done quite some number of studies over a good decade or so now. So I will pick and choose and show you the best, so to say. And then I will end up with, are we there yet with our anthocyanin research, or what is still unknown, and is there potential for giving it more attention? So I will also cover at the end, is it worth the attention, as you can see in the title. Now let me start with why the interest in anthocyanin-rich supplementation. When you Google the word anthocyanin, you get this, and you click on images, you get all these colorful pictures of, you may recognize some berries in there and some fruits. You get also the word antioxidant and some chemical structures as well, which consist of so-called phenol rings. And if you have multiple phenol rings, that is a compound that is called a polyphenol. So an anthocyanin is a polyphenol, and it sort of indicates already in this figure that it has potentially antioxidant effects. Now, why do you get all these nice colors in this Google search in the images? Is because the anthocyanins in flowers and plants, they do give the bright colors to the fruit and the flowers. So it provides color to life, basically, what we see around us. So anthocyanins are part of the so-called flavonoid family. Hopefully you can see my mouse hovering over the flavonoids, and it's quite a staggering number of polyphenols that exist, more than 8,000. And the largest category are the flavonoids, in which the anthocyanins are a subcategory. And even among the flavonoids, there's more than 4,000 and more than 600 different kind of anthocyanins. So where do you start? It's really an emerging area. For some who are familiar with polyphenols or with sports nutrition, you may recognize here also the catechins, the quercetin. You may have heard those, or you may have seen studies being, those compounds being used in sports nutrition research. But polyphenols are considered exogenous antioxidants, and basically something that can work as an antioxidant is being seen as beneficial. I also gave you here an example of one of the anthocyanins, cyanidin 3-glucoside. So An anthocyanin is basically a anthocyanidin, whatever that is, with a sugar attached to it, and you have many different kinds. Now, what is also very interesting is that of the 4,000 flavonoids that exist, it's only 2 years ago that one guideline came out for the category flavonols, and I've given you here some nice pictures of foods that are rich in these flavonols: apples, pears, again berries, certain nuts, chocolate. And the advice here in the guideline was to consume it not so much as an extract, but we need to make sure that in our daily diet that you get about 600 milligrams of the flavonols, because potentially that has reduces your risk for cardiovascular disease and provides cardiometabolic health. Now, there are no guidelines for anthocyanins, and so you will hear in my presentation that we dosed with certain amounts of anthocyanins, and I'm quite sure some will have the question, why are you giving those amounts? And frankly, that is still work in progress, what the optimal dosing strategy should be for anthocyanins. If we look at the polyphenol composition now of various colorful fruit and berries, and I've put a box around the fruit blackcurrant. Officially, it's a fruit, which is a bit odd because it looks like a berry, but officially it's a fruit. And if you look at the polyphenol composition of blackcurrant compared with the others that I've listed here, it's not the fruit with the highest amount of polyphenols relative to fresh weight. But what is obvious is it's one of those fruits that seems to consist primarily of anthocyanins. So it's sort of safe to say that if you dose somebody with blackcurrant, and I'm going to show you examples of studies in which we dose with powder and with extract, then you basically give them anthocyanins. But you also give them very specific anthocyanins, because if you look at the anthocyanin composition, and this is information that comes from a website called Phenol Explorer, and all that information is freely available. So if you want to check on this information, go to that website. But what I show here is that different berries, different fruits, they have, as I showed you in the previous slides, different amounts of polyphenols, but then also the specific anthocyanin composition is different. So that's one of the take-home messages, really, that when you are interested in anthocyanin-rich supplements, it may be important that the composition of that supplement needs to be known in order to understand the potential effects that it can give. Okay, so there is a great interest in anthocyanins, and when I teach my students, there is almost no lesson in which not a PubMed search is being done on some information in the literature. And what is interesting, I did this search last week. When you search for anthocyanin or anthocyanins as a title word, so you only get the papers with those words in the title, then you can see since the year 2000 or so, there's an exponential increase in research being published on anthocyanins. And since 2018, it's more than one paper a day. But we are now in 2024, so this research is really flourishing in only 2 decades or so. And the reason is that we now understand that particular polyphenols, including anthocyanins, they are really beneficial for providing health. And so there's more mechanistic work going on in that area, and that is probably why there is the interest. If I would do this search with adding exercise to it, then the number of papers that show up are only in the hundreds. So it's still very limited what is available. Let me talk briefly about, as far as I know, the first dosing study with an anthocyanin-rich supplement. This was chokeberry juice. You see the berry there in the picture, nice dark color. And what they did here in elite rowers from the Polish national rowing team, they were dosed for 4 weeks with drinks containing a certain amount of anthocyanins. The value is there in the slides, 17 milligrams of anthocyanins. And they were dosed with 50 milliliters per day, 3 times. So reasonable amount. You don't need to drink liters of this stuff to get anthocyanins in your system. And then what they did is they measured, as a result of a particular exercise protocol, they measured a marker of oxidative stress. And here's the abbreviation is provided, TBARS. It's basically a measure of oxidative stress. And there is some debate whether this is a good marker or not, but we'll take it from now that this anthocyanin-rich supplement was able to reduce the presence of that marker of oxidative stress. So what that indicates is that it works as an antioxidant, basically. And so the authors concluded that the anthocyanins, and in this case it was measured in red blood cells, but it could well have been in other cells, that they enhance the endogenous antioxidant defense system. And within exercise physiology, that is meaningful, because that's why people train. And that's why people train for long periods of time, to enhance your antioxidant defense system. Now, there is also, I highlighted already, the composition of blackcurrant, and I'm going to focus now more on our blackcurrant findings. But why did we get into this area? Because our first studies were sort of in 2013, 2014. There was this study from 2005 on the effects of anthocyanin intake, again from blackcurrants, on peripheral muscle blood flow. And blackcurrant was able to increase blood flow by 22%, an acute effect. And blood flow is very, very important. So as an exercise physiologist, that should attract attention. But this study was done in people doing typing activity. That's not the kind of papers that you would normally look for for the teaching that you do, and for your updating your exercise physiology knowledge. But very interesting, 2005, a paper that blackcurrant could enhance blood flow. In 2009, there was a paper on, again, the effect of blackcurrant on oxidative stress. And the reason why I highlighted here peer-reviewed papers before 2013, that is when we started to do our research. And we were not really interested in recovery effects. I wanted to know whether it does something during exercise. So again, a PubMed search, blackcurrant as a title word, and exercise with a filter applied for a certain time period. There was only one paper in the literature. And what did this paper show? It showed, again, a lower indication of a marker of oxidative stress. So some anecdotal information as well, and interestingly, it is from the the Dutch national triathlon team, who used and this is in 2011, where they said that they used a powder made from New Zealand grown blackcurrant, and they used that for recovery effects from their training sessions. So where we are in 2013, when we started, some anecdotal information, some indication that it could increase blood flow and that it could lower exercise-induced oxidative stress. So let me move on now to metabolic and exercise performance effects. And as I mentioned, I am particularly interested in what's happening during exercise. Yes, there are observations on, we know now that it is able to reduce muscle soreness, which you measure mainly after exercise, but we were interested in the effects during exercise. And before I go to those observations, our initial studies, we had 4 posters at the ISSN conference in Clearwater Beach in Florida in the USA. And you may wonder, why do I show you this? Well, in the picture there, well, we had 4 posters, which was great on our findings. No publications yet, just posters that were presented. And in the picture there, you see in the middle a guy with some really bright shorts. And here's a bigger picture of the 3 of us at the conference. And there may be some online now, some of you who may recognize that guy in the middle, but I'm quite sure there will be a lot who don't recognize who that person is with the glasses and the bright red shorts in the middle. Well, that person is Professor Roger Harris. And last week we had a webinar by Richard Kreider. There was mention of Roger Harris because he was instrumental in providing us with applications for dosing with creatine. And he also was instrumental in, as far as I know, he did the first biopsy study that showed that dosing with beta-alanine could lead to an increase in carnosine, and that was work that was done here at the University of Chichester, where I am. And he is, creatine and beta-alanine is on the A list of the Australian Institute of Sport framework. I will come back to that later on. But he came to our posters and he just said, he's an exercise biochemist. It's too good to be true. He just couldn't believe it. And he challenged us with, what is causing these effects and so on. And our research was very applied, so we were very happy with our observations, but still a long way to go what really explains it. But what happened is a year later, almost, Roger wrote me an email and he said, as a result of last year's contact at the conference, he has planted now 4 blackcurrant bushes to go with an equal number of red and white currant bushes. So clearly he has looked at it in a bit more detail because I kept him informed about our publications, and that's almost like an endorsement. Is it worth the intention, is what I have in the title. Roger Harris clearly saw potential in this area of research. Okay, let me now go to some of those metabolic and exercise performance effects. First study, 2015, we dosed individuals, triathletes, with New Zealand blackcurrant powder. This was a dosing study for 7 days. You see that we dosed daily with about 140 milligrams of anthocyanins. And what we found, as I mentioned, we were interested in effects during exercise. We found lower lactate values at mainly the lower intensities of exercise. So New Zealand blackcurrant resulted in a shift of the cycling intensity lactate curve. Normally, you see these observations following physical training programs over long periods of time. It's a very common adaptation as a result of endurance training or aerobic training. So we were really, really excited about this. It's a nice observation, but what really matters for an athlete, and for those who attended the webinar by Louise Burke 2 weeks ago, she did mention what matters for an athlete is performance. Can they go faster? Can they do something better when they are in competition? So we did a performance study. This was done in controlled laboratory conditions, where I want to point out that we did 2 full familiarizations of the task at hand, which was a 10-mile cycling time trial. We dosed for 7 days with 105 milligrams of anthocyanins, and we had now availability of capsules, because you want to do placebo-controlled double-blind crossover studies, which is sort of an accepted gold standard design for these supplementation studies. And what we observed was an increase in performance of about 2.4%, which is more or less what had been reported for beetroot. And so, comparable with beetroot, the performance changes for an endurance exercise task. And beetroot, as many of you know, is also, just as creatine and beta-alanine, on the A list for performance supplements by the Australian Institute of Sport. And we're very pleased because there's not many individuals who are doing research on anthocyanins and with applications that it can have for sport and exercise. We were very pleased that a group from Newcastle, Glenn Howardson, and colleagues who are well known for cherry work as well, they dosed with a so-called Huskap berry for 7 days, and they found a 2% increase in performance during 5-kilometer treadmill running. So very pleased that other anthocyanin-rich supplements can have similar performance-enhancing effects. What is always very intriguing when you do sports nutrition or sports supplementation research, you always get individual responses, and I show you here the individual responses of our first cycling study. The cohort effect was 2.4%. You can see there's a few individuals with very meaningful performance-enhancing effects. So this was endurance aerobic exercise. What about high-intensity intermittent exercise? Exercise that happens during the sports that I show you here in this slide. So I don't want to go too much into the protocol. It was a treadmill running protocol that had an increase in intensity over time, and there were 6 running bouts with a short break, and then an increase in intensity, and so on. And this is a protocol where at one point the participants reach exhaustion. So high intensity, intermittent exercise with an increase in intensity over time. We dosed for 7 days again with 1 capsule, and we found an increase in running distance of 11%. And that was a bit high, I have to say. And frankly, when Roger Harris saw our posters at the conference, he said it's too good to be true. And this is what I thought as well when we had this observation. Well, we decided to publish it, although but actually I thought we need to replicate this. because what if something was not done properly? But we published it, and since then we have been able to replicate this, not with finding 11%, but close to 9%. So this is a repeatable observation. Individual responses for some were scary high, I have to say, as you can see here in the figure. So clearly, some individuals can really benefit from New Zealand blackcurrant with doing high intensity intermittent work. As I mentioned, we have repeated this study. This is unpublished data that I briefly show with you, not all the details of this, but we used the same protocol, and what we found was close to 9% increase in sprint distance, with 1 in 3, and you can argue whether that's good or not, but 1 in 3 being consistent high responders. So watch out, this paper is in preparation as we speak. Actually, I worked on it today, so hopefully it can go out for peer review soon. Okay, let me move back again to some metabolic effects. I showed you the changes in lactate, and what we also did during the exercise protocol is measuring substrate utilization, and I'm only going to focus here on the effects that we had on fat oxidation during exercise. I'm not going to share all the studies, I just pick and choose the ones that I really like. We did in 2017, this was all work done by my PhD student at that time, Matthew Cook. He did an absolute great job with all these studies. He had a dose response study. You see here in the figure the different doses of blackcurrant extract that were used. Note that these are not the amount of anthocyanins, but just the amount of the total extract. And I show you here the increase in fat oxidation of 22% that we observed with a dosing of 2 capsules a day, about 210 milligrams of anthocyanins. And that's very high again. Too good to be true, maybe. But so there was quite some skepticism among sports nutritionists, especially here in the UK, because we found changes in performance. This was our second study where we had changes in fat oxidation. People just were a bit skeptical what was happening here. It was all turning gold in our hands, so to say. So what we decided to do is to do a collaboration with Liverpool John Moores University, who's also well known for its sports nutrition research, and we asked them whether they were interested in doing the male study that we did in Chichester with females. And they did, and they found a whopping 27% increase in fat oxidation. And so this was a study done in Liverpool John Moores, had no involvement from us, except that we shared the methodology for them to use, and they basically replicated the finding in female cyclists. So that was absolutely fantastic. Now, why do you get these high increases in fat oxidation? Again, we may have some questions about that later on, but fat metabolism is quite complex. You have your storage and mobilization, so maybe you release more free fatty acids. You have your transport to the working muscles. Maybe that enhanced blood flow that I mentioned can play a role on that. And then you have the uptake ultimately in the mitochondria where your beta oxidation occurs. And so potentially, and I'm speculating here, the antioxidant effect could have an effect on particular enzymes that make maybe some of those processes more efficient. Now, the two studies that I showed you, the male and female cyclists, was done in individuals who were able to cycle for 2 hours, which is not a bad feat to do. But we also have an interest in whether people who are really endurance trained, whether they still respond to the supplement. So in this particular study, which was published 2 years ago, I think, we had the opportunity to test an individual in between a 100-mile run. Well, he did 200-mile runs with 5 weeks in between, and we were able to dose him in that period, and again have our measurements of physiological responses, including metabolic responses. I'm only going to show you here the fat oxidation data. We dosed him for 7 days with 2 capsules a day. And then the individual came to the lab and ran a half marathon in 120 minutes time. He was also allowed to use his sort of personalized dosing with some gels, but what we found was an increase in 23% in fat oxidation. And so I've shown you the 22% as a cohort in males, 27% in females, and now we had a case study where the individual responded with 23%. Also, just recently, this was published a few months ago, I think, we were able to test an Ironman athlete, an amateur male Ironman athlete who was competing in Barcelona, and we were able to test him 2 to 3 weeks before competition. We did not have the time to do dosing over multiple days with washouts and so on, so we decided to do acute high dose intake of 4 capsules, the highest we have ever done. And what we observed, and again, this individual cycled or did an exercise task for long duration. He cycled for 4 hours and used an individualized protocol, and we found an increase of 13% now of fat oxidation. Also, what is very interesting in this individual, his lactates became lower after about 2 hours or so and stayed lower compared with the placebo condition. So we have some cohort studies and case studies where you can see the metabolic effects. Okay, finally, moving on quickly. I still have a few minutes. Talking about, are we there yet, the unknowns, and is it worth the attention? If I haven't convinced you yet, then I still have a few slides to convince you whether it is worth the attention. The mechanisms are going to be extremely challenging compared with, for example, other supplements. When you dose with phosphocreatine, or with creatine, you get elevated levels of phosphocreatine and so on. It's almost, you know, quite easy to understand what is going on. It's a bit more challenging, I think, with the dosing of anthocyanins. In 2013, they labeled one particular anthocyanin, cyanidin 3-glucoside, which is present in blackcurrant as well, and they looked at the recovery of the compounds that are a result of the intake. Now, I'm not going into details here, but I want to point out the recovery. The recovery indicates here the metabolites that they were able to trace back in the urine, in the feces, in the blood, and in the breath over a 48-hour period. And what you see here is that you have this extremely wide range, with one individual almost allowing detection of everything that went in, but there's others, this one with 15%, where basically after 2 days, you still don't know where all the stuff is. So maybe it is this that can contribute to the individual responses, because the intake of anthocyanins results in the bioavailability of all kind of compounds, and those are the ones that probably will ultimately result in the changes that you can measure in humans by changing cell function. So here another example, cyanidin 3-glucoside results in 16 metabolites, but life is much more complicated. When we dose with New Zealand blackcurrant or other dosing studies, we don't know what these metabolites, the appearance of these metabolites in the bloodstream. And ultimately, it is dose working synergistically that may change cell function and lead to, for example, an increase in human performance or an increase in metabolic changes. Okay, is it worth the attention? In capital letters here. Well, the supplement that we used has been a winner, in a few competitions. It was European Sports Nutrition Product of the Year in 2022. So obviously the business is very happy with that. We are having a symposium in 2025 at the ACSM annual meeting. If you're there, come and say hello. This is very nice for the business, but what I found more important is whether there's recognition by regulating bodies. And so the Australian Institute of Sport has the Group A performance supplements with those here listed on the slide. They also have a Group B that consists of food polyphenols. And it was very pleasing to see that in 2028, they mentioned specifically blackcurrant in that category. So we are on the B list now. Do we make it to the A list? I don't know. Much more research needs to be done. But is it worth the attention? If you are on the B list of the Australian Institute of Sport, there may be a reason why you are on there. Okay. Thank you very much. Some acknowledgements here, because all that work was not done by me alone, but in collaboration with lots of other people in the UK and in the world. And the take-home message for this is that the intake of anthocyanin-rich New Zealand blackcurrant has enriched the world of sport and exercise nutrition and shown the potential for anthocyanin supplementation. Thank you very much for listening.